Coming up on Lawmakers, the House and Senate passed the statewide water ban, but not without opposition. Upset over perceived lack of action on veto overrides, impeachment talk surfaces. And the 23rd annual State of Georgia tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening. Also on Lawmakers, it's the end of the first week under the Gold Dome. We take a look back and talk to Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com.
And a tribute to the late Thomas B. Murphy, Georgia's longest-serving Speaker of the House. But first, our top story tonight, historic action in the House and Senate. The state has its first statewide water management plan. After much debate in the House and Senate this morning, both passed identical measures. Lawmaker Sandra Parrish joins us now with more. Sandra.
In Wani, the plan passed overwhelmingly in both houses, but it was not without opposition. As expected, many of the rural lawmakers were not happy with how the boundaries of the 11 regional districts in the plan were drawn.
Ladies and gentlemen, Georgia just made history in the state Senate. The yeas are 39, the nays are 12. This resolution, having received reference to the Constitution, is therefore passed. Congratulations, Senate.
Lawmakers passed the plan approved by the Water Council, which was created in 2004 under then House Bill 237. In the Senate today, Senator Ross Tolleson presented Senate Resolution 701.
This plan is not carved in stone where it can't change. It's got great flexibility moving forward. We'll have a huge impact on it as a body moving forward.
But Senator Preston Smith joined other lawmakers from outside Metro Atlanta to oppose it.
My district right now has an abundant source of clean water. But we don't know if 30 years from now, when everyone in this chamber will have turned over and the state will look very different, if my district will have an abundant source of clean water. So why today are we forcing this issue to be taken up for an up or down vote? Because the 2004 legislature told us to?
Over in the House, Representative Lynn Smith presented House Resolution 1022.
We have been studying this for 3 years based on our watersheds. We want these districts to be based as much as possible on our watersheds. So these districts you're looking at in Chapter 14 are based on watersheds as much as possible.
But if we put together our districts by where the water actually is, by where God put it to begin with, by what we do with it in the channel where it flows, because this planning region simply doesn't do that.
Environmental groups are also opposed to the plan.
Well, we're really disappointed that they passed this water plan. It's little more than a study. It's not enforceable. It has no teeth. Some call it a step forward. We see it as a sidestep from the bold decisions that need to be made now, given the plight of water in the state of Georgia.
I thought the interesting thing was even the supporters of the bill admitted there were a lot of flaws that needed to be fixed. The problem is, are we going to actually see those problems fixed? And so I firmly believe that until we do, we haven't had a successful statewide water planning process. So we hope the legislature continues to work on this issue throughout the session.
And there's some question now that both resolutions have passed in their respective houses as to where they go from here. Normally, each house would have to vote on the other's legislation, but the governor's office tells me since the two are identical, they will now go straight to his desk for him to sign. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Sandra Parrish.
Thank you, Sandra. Now, also in the House, Representative Ron Forster, upset about the Senate not taking up the House veto overrides for Monday, is calling for the impeachment of Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle.
If you don't like the Constitution, you can change it, but you cannot ignore it. We took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of this state.
I have drafted the resolution for the impeachment charges. However, I'm having a letter that I'm sending, and one letter's already gone, I believe, from another member to our attorney generals so that we can get an opinion on that section of the Constitution, specifically immediate consideration, which, like I said, the next three words say upon a vote.
Now, Lieutenant Governor Cagle's office has responded to Representative Forster's comments by saying, "We appreciate Representative Forster's injection of some humor into a stressful legislative session." The Senate Rules Committee has not set a date of when to vote on bringing the overrides to the Senate floor.
The annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration took place in the north wing of the Capitol this morning. WSB News anchor Monica Pearson was the ceremony's keynote speaker, followed by Governor Perdue and Martin Luther King III. The remembrance ceremony began with the ladies of the Spelman College Glee Club.
Dr. King's message speaks clearly as he reminds us over and over again of our connections. He said all men are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. And then he addressed it another way. As Daddy King used to call me and say, and your father called me at strange hours to talk, Mrs. Ferris, he would say, make it plain. Dr. King made it plain when he said, we are bound together in a single garment of destiny. Oh, how these words speak even today. But you know, we can't understand that single destiny until we really understand each other. Dr. King preached a message of sharing our lives. In 1958, he said something that still is very true today. Men often hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they cannot communicate. And they cannot communicate because they are separated. And even though we are side by side in this room, side by side in our workplace, and sometimes sharing neighborhoods, we truly still don't know each other. Black, white, yellow, and brown, and red. We no longer have to guess who's coming to dinner because we no longer invite. Until we share more than our jobs together, we truly will never know or understand each other. Until we get together in social events without each race going to its own corner or space, there will never be open conversation. So invite somebody to church and then go to theirs. You may find by socializing and praying together, you have a lot more in common than you think. And it has to do with faith and values. But that means you got to step out on faith. And Dr. King's message was plain there. Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't even see the whole staircase. And sometimes that first step must be taken by one person, an individual. Had Rosa Parks not refused to move from her seat on the bus, there would not have been a bus boycott, and the rest is history. An individual act ignited a movement. And if we work one-on-one, then expand to small groups, we can begin to work on the problems that concern us in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our churches, in our homes, and in our government.
Thank God for people who will not do the easy, who will not do the safe, who will not do the popular, who will not do the politic, but will stand up day by day in this world even today and do the right thing. May that be the inspiration today that we have, taking away from this day, a day that we celebrate annually. May it permeate our lives the other 364 days out of the year. This isn't just like going to church on Sunday, Maurice. We got to live the rest of the year like this. Let's take that message and commit it in our own hearts today as we come annually today to celebrate his life. Let's celebrate that message that he would have us to have, that God loves us, and wants us to love one another and live in peace. Martin, would you come and take the proclamation, please? Thank you very much. Yes. Ms. Ferris, please join us as well. Once again, on behalf of 9.5 million Georgians, I want to issue the proclamation to Martin III and to Ms. Christine Ferris, the sister, to proclaim this day, this week. If you believe what I said, let's proclaim this year Martin Luther King year.
Now you can see more of those tributes on Monday evening. Tune in for Martin Luther King Jr., A Capitol Remembrance. That's Monday, January 21st at 7 p.m. only on GPB.
Well, if the first week of the session is a preview of what's to come, it looks like this year's legislative session is going to be rather lively. Bridget Snapp takes a look back at week number 1 for the General Assembly.
The 2008 session started off with a bang when the House voted to override 12 of Governor Perdue's vetoes from last session.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to the authority of Article 3, Section 5, Paragraph 13 of the Georgia Constitution, I move the House vote to override the Governor's veto, number 2, of 2007, House Bill 162, relating to sales and use tax exemptions for art centers and health clinics and related matters.
The bills range from tax credits to protections of the book allowance for Hope Scholarship recipients.
On the gentleman's motion, the yeas are 147. The nays 22. The House has overridden the veto of the Governor on House Bill 162. The matter shall be immediately transmitted to the Senate, where the Constitution of Georgia, not a statute, but the Constitution requires them as their oath to immediately consider, not to play a game.
The bills are currently in the Senate Rules Committee, and while Lieutenant Governor Cagle said the Senate will carefully consider the bills, he called the actions of the House a display of petty politics.
You know, the process the House has taken, they feel very serious about it, and we don't want to belittle that, but on the same token, we need to deliberate over what it is that they've done. I mean, these are, you know, pretty serious issues, and we'll take them up and look at it.
The Speaker and Lieutenant Governor met with Governor Perdue the next morning at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast, where the Speaker focused his discussion on tax reform.
It is time to quit taxing objects and start taxing consumption. Sales tax and consumption taxes are what we should be looking at to fund local government and to tax someone's place of abode, to tax a business, to tax inventory. I can go on and on and on. Sad.
The governor took the opportunity to unveil 2 of his educational initiatives, one to encourage parents to get involved in their children's education, and the other to create a website scoreboard to allow schools to measure their own progress.
I'm a big scorekeeper. I believe what Vince Lombardi said, if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. In education, we want to keep score. I think a good visible scoreboard is one of the best things that we can have for our state, that we can look at on an ongoing basis to let us know how we're doing. Some of those numbers, just like when I played football, I didn't like to look up and see the score, but it showed me that I need to play harder. I need to put more effort out there.
Governor Perdue had a chance to announce some of his other initiatives for this session at the annual State of the State address. One of those includes the reduction of property taxes.
This year, I'm also proposing to the legislature a constitutional amendment to eliminate the state portion of property tax. This would do away with the state portion of the ad valorem tax, $94 million in tax relief to Georgia homeowners and automobile owners.
A little more than an hour later, Representative Kathy Ash delivered the Democratic response, challenging the governor's record on health care, transportation, and education. The governor also announced $53 million for a statewide trauma network. Though he didn't mention a specific amount for the struggling Grady Memorial Hospital, Lieutenant Governor Cagle told us yesterday that he expects a good portion to go Grady's way.
I think there's broad consensus in the legislature by myself and others that a portion of the trauma funding that's been set aside should be articulated and placed there at Grady.
In other news, a controversial gun bill introduced during the 2007 legislative session passed the state Senate yesterday. As passed, HB 89 allows licensed gun owners to bring guns to work with their employer's permission. And that's a look back at this week under the Gold Dome.
As you just saw, it's the end of the first legislative week of the Georgia General Assembly. That means it's time to check in with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. I had a chance to sit down with Tom earlier today. We began by discussing the unusually busy first week.
The week really started off well, as you know, with overriding of 12 vetoes by the governor. We got into a gun carry bill that had the two sides fighting a little bit. We got into the statewide water plan, which both the House and Senate approved this morning. It's hard really to think of an issue they didn't get into this first week, with maybe the exception of certificate of need over on the health care side.
Let's talk about one of the big ones we knew was going to be a big issue coming in, and that's tax reform. We knew about the Speaker's plan, but the governor's laid one out too.
He did. He said in his State of the State speech on Wednesday, I believe, that he is proposing taking off the state property tax, which amounts to $250,000. Not a big amount of money, $94 million in total, and I think for each household it amounts to maybe $30 in a year's time. But it's a small gesture, but it will help some people, and as Casey Cagle said, a tax cut is a tax cut is a tax cut.
And he calls his a tax cut as opposed to a tax shift.
That's correct, because the Speaker's great tax plan, as you know, would eliminate the property tax on some things, but would replace it with a sales tax on services and other things as well. So it's hard to say that that's a tax cut when you're just substituting one form of tax for another.
The other big issue we knew was going to be coming up is water. Affected just about everybody in the state, and everyone here at the Capitol felt they needed to do something about it, and it seems today they're starting to.
They did. The House and Senate both adopted it's really more of a statewide water policy than a plan, but the hope is that it will be a blueprint to come up with a way of managing the state's water resources to ensure that if we have droughts in the future, and obviously we will, that we won't get caught short like we did this past fall.
Let's talk about one of the issues that started big last session, became quite controversial, and led into this session, and that's the gun bill. It's changed a little from the original version. If you could explain that.
It's a bill to make it easier, really, to get a gun and to carry a gun in various public places. The National Rifle Association wanted to have a provision in there basically allowing people to take a gun with them to work if they wanted to. It would make it illegal for a business or an employer to prohibit employees from keeping guns in their cars when they're parked in a company parking lot. That was very much opposed by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and some other business groups. They thought it was an encroachment on a business owner's right of property or private property rights. A lot of discussion about that this week, and in the end, the business groups really won out. The bill was gutted considerably before it came out of committee, and then the Senate adopted it in that watered-down version.
So that's what happened in the Senate, but the very first thing that happened in the House at the beginning of the week, legislative day one, were the 12 overrides immediately shot over to the Senate, and then it stopped.
Yes, the House they were going to take up 26 bills in all that the governor had vetoed after last year's session. They wound up voting to override 12 of those vetoes, basically rejecting what the governor did. They immediately sent them to the Senate. The state constitution says that in a situation like that, these veto overrides must be immediately considered, but as Lieutenant Governor Cagle defines that, immediately considered means to immediately send the bills to committee, where he said, we'll look at them for a few weeks and maybe we'll vote on one or two of them at some point.
And that has one legislator quite upset over on the House side.
Ron Forster, who's a House member from up in northwest Georgia, is very angry at what the Lieutenant Governor has done. He has drafted a resolution calling for the impeachment of Casey Cagle on the grounds that Cagle allegedly violated his oath of office. Obviously, it's not going to go anywhere, but it gave folks a little something to laugh about here.
Before we go, what do you expect to see next week?
Next week we'll have the budget hearings, or as they call them, the budget briefings on the governor's proposed budget, both for the rest of this fiscal year and for the fiscal year that starts July 1. Since there are some signs that we seem to be slipping into a recession or at least an economic slowdown, it might make their job a little harder in coming up with a budget agreement this year.
Thank you very much. Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com. Thanks again, Tom.
Great to be here.
The Sons of the Confederate Veterans and Daughters of the Confederacy were in the south wing of the Capitol this afternoon to celebrate the birthday of General Robert E. Lee. The commemoration of General Lee's 201st birthday began with the playing of Dixie, an invocation, and 3 pledges to the U.S., Georgia, and Confederate flags.
Salute the Confederate flag with affection, reverence, and undying devotion to the cause for which it stands.
Representatives Tommy Benton and Alan Powell were the only legislators in attendance. Powell said the population growth in Georgia makes today's event more significant.
People who don't know Southern heritage, they have a predisposed notion in a lot of cases of what the War of Northern Aggression was about, and not the real truth. The Sons of Confederate Veterans has always been a historic fellowship, a group to promote the truth and the historical truth, not the political correctness or the changing of the day. And I would implore each and every one of you to do that, to cast forth the truth of what the cause was about, what the war was about, so that for those future generations, that as they grow, they'll know the truth about what those our ancestors who had given their all for a hard cause.
While the governor himself did not attend, a proclamation was read to honor the day.
Now, therefore, I, Sonny Perdue, Governor of the State of Georgia, do hereby recognize January 19, 2008 as the 201st birthday of Robert E. Lee, encourage our citizens to observe this occasion with appropriate ceremonies. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the Executive Department to be affixed this 15th day of January in the year of our Lord 2008. Signed, Sonny Perdue, Governor, Ed F. Holcomb, Chief of Staff. Happy birthday, General Lee, and God save the South. Thank you.
Now, Georgia has annually commemorated General Lee's birthday since 1872.
Also at the Capitol today, the chorus from Browns Mill Elementary performed. Lawmakers' Kyle Hood has the story.
Every year, talented young musicians across the state of Georgia travel to the state capitol to perform. Today, the featured vocalist came from Browns Mill Elementary, located in Lithonia, Georgia.
Well, this is the birthday weekend observance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., so we thought it would be a wonderful experience to come to the state capitol and share the music of love, peace, and holding on to our dreams.
I even had a chance to speak with a few members of the chorus. The singers from grades 4 through 6 expressed their excitement about singing in the Capitol.
I love singing in the Capitol today because I'm being exposed to a different environment, basically.
Okay.
I think it's a great experience because it's not every day that you get to sing in such an amazing place.
Right.
I think it's real fun because you get to represent Browns Mill, and it's just a fun experience.
Reporting from the north wing of the Capitol, I'm Kyle Hood for Lawmakers.
Now, one voice that echoed throughout state government for over 4 decades was that of Thomas B. Murphy. Memories of the late House Speaker have been echoing in the Capitol halls as this session kicks off.
I could not help but think at this moment in time, right here, in the Thomas Murphy Ballroom, in light of the fact that only a month ago, Speaker Murphy passed away, that we shouldn't take just a second to say, you know what, we wouldn't be sitting in this room. We wouldn't have many of the things we have, and we wouldn't have the Georgia World Congress Center if it weren't for the work of people like Tom Murphy.
On Monday at the Georgia Chamber of Commerce Eggs and Issues breakfast.
This afternoon, we continue to mourn the passing of Speaker Tom Murphy, a true Georgia leader.
On Tuesday, when Democrats gave their response to the State of the State address. This session has begun with bipartisan invocation of the name of the man known as Mr. Speaker for 28 years.
Our convening having arrived, all members please take seats and cease all but conversation. Ring the bell, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Doorkeeper, would you go back here and stay with the gentleman from the first? I see he's arrived, and I'm sure that we're going to need an escort the rest of the day for him.
Known as both cantankerous and caring, his 1974 to 2002 tenure is also characterized by increased business development throughout the state and years of wading through some of the same political waters being navigated by current lawmakers.
All of us know what the problem is. All of us have talked about the problem long enough. I don't have any suggestions. I don't have any solutions. I don't have any recommendations. All I say it's time for us to quit talking about the problem and start talking about solutions. Unless something happens come January of '76, there is little doubt in my mind that the General Assembly will be faced with two choices. One of two choices. Either cut back state services or raise taxes. I tell you here and now, I am bitterly opposed to any increase in taxation at any time. 7 or 8 years ago when we had that Blue Ribbon Commission that worked so much and cost us so much money to try to come up with a new program and didn't come up with a thing, it's been my experience that trying to rewrite the tax laws by a Blue Ribbon Commission or any other thing has just been a total waste of time. We have a terrible issue on water in Georgia, you know. If we don't settle our issues with Alabama and Florida and water, we're in a mess, bad mess. We know the drought, all the projections are that we're not going to get much rain this year, that the drought's going to continue and we'll be in trouble there, so we need to take some kind of steps to see that water is available. Our gentlemen have arrived. I declare this House adjourned. Sonny die.
Earlier this week in this very rotunda stood a 32-foot tall cedar Christmas tree. That beautiful giant aglow with lights symbolic to all the hope and joy of the season of peace. Today, another giant lies in this place.
Former Speaker Tom Murphy died December 17, 2007 at age 83. On December 21st, he made his final visit to the House chamber.
Speaker Richardson and I would like to adjourn this service sine die.
He will be missed. Coming up next week at the Capitol, budget hearings Tuesday through Thursday. We'll have the highlights and all the latest Capitol news Tuesday through Thursday of next week at 7 p.m. We'd like to remind you to watch Martin Luther King Jr., a Capitol Remembrance, Monday at 7 p.m. That's only on GPB. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and evenings at 6 on Georgia Gazette.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 5th legislative day of 2008. I'm Nwandi Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Tuesday.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.